that was back in 2002. And we were trying to do remote desktop and dial-up. Hello and welcome to episode 27 of Great Things with Great Tech, the podcast highlighting companies doing great things with great technology. My name is Anthony Spiteri, and in this episode, we're talking to Paul Butcher, co-founder of HostedBizz. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thanks for having me, Anthony. Quite excited to participate.
Excellent. So as per usual, just before we get into all the good stuff, if you love great things with great tech and would like to feature in future episodes, you can click on the link in the show notes or go to launch.gtwgt.com and register your interest. All episodes of GTWGT are available on YouTube. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe on the link below. And just a final reminder, if you like to consume these via podcast, we're on all the good podcast platforms out there, Apple, Spotify, Google, all distributed via anchor.fm. So Paul, with that, let's get talking into service providers again, because I haven't talked about service providers on the show for a couple of episodes now. I've kind of broken away a little bit from the thing that started this thing, right? So let's get back into my favorite topic, which is talking about innovative, great service providers. And HostedBizz is certainly one of those. And just as we start with history and facts, maybe kick it off by introducing yourself a little bit and then talking about how HostedBizz came to be.
That's great. So, again, thanks for having us. And we started HostedBizz in 2012. Prior to that, myself and my co-founder Jim Stetcherson, we've been high-tech guys for, well, you can see from the grey hair, for many, many years. And I was out of interest long-term in the telephony space, running a Mitel corporation. Around the world for selling PBX and ultimately virtualized unified control that's running in the cloud. So that was my, if you like, my impetus into the cloud. And then we decided there was an opportunity to create a cloud company that would really create a suite of cloud services that we could target at the mid-market. Because at the time, very large companies had the expertise to go to cloud. Very small companies had no appetite for the cloud. In that mid-market, there was just no expertise, and we saw the opportunity to create a channel-centric infrastructure as a service company that would play into that space.
Right. Okay. And just to sort of level, it's a Canadian company operating out of Canada. Is it just within Canada? Have you got other sites outside of Canada, or is it purely just centered on the Canadian market?
So the Canadian market is very significant to us. So it represents about 80% of our revenues, about 10%, a little more than 10% out of the US, and then about the same again, actually primarily out of the UK. We've got a number of UK clients that are really affiliated with either Canadian or US entities. So we're in the UK as well.
Yeah, because obviously your accent is not native Canadian. So you're obviously, where's your background? Where are you from?
I'm from Wokingham, Berkshire, which is about 40 kilometers west of London. Yeah. And as a consequence of that, obviously a Chelsea supporter and looking forward to the Champions League final on the 29th, where we're going to.
I'll be rooting for you because I'm a Manchester United supporter, so I do not want City to win. So
absolutely,
nobody wants City to win.
Yeah, so that's where I'm from, and I moved to Canada in 1999 to run Mitel worldwide. Actually, that's what caused me to come to Canada, and we've been here ever since.
Good stuff. And it's good. There are some great tech companies, obviously around the world, right? But I think I've in my role, and I've really come across some really innovative companies coming out of Canada. So it's great to kind of keep that going. In fact, I think I've had one other company on the show that was Canadian in a different space, but it's just great for me to be talking to, companies in all areas of the world, but obviously great to Canada as well, because all part of the Commonwealth, right? Right, let's get back to HostedBizz. And so the company was originally focused on VDI solutions based around Citrix. And this was around the 2012 period. So let's spend some time talking about that, because I think it's significant, and it probably led to you guys being successful in other areas. But maybe just chat a little bit about those early days and actually focusing on those VDI solutions. And was it ready? Was it the year of VDI back then?
Well, it's interesting because what do you do when you're going to start a new company? You sit around thinking, well, what are we going to do? And as I said, Jim and I are high tech people, so we were sitting around and what's the next big thing? And we felt that VDI was the next big thing, and we thought that there was a real market opportunity for people having their desktops in the cloud. Those desktops would be fully managed, they're backed up, they're secure. You can access them from any other device, and we felt that the technology had come along sufficiently that those desktops in the cloud would be very reliable. Mm-hmm. And then we felt it was quite compelling, so that's what we did. We racked up some assets. We cobbled together what we could find to when the company was a few weeks old, and we racked up enough compute, and we were very focused on desktop performance. So we were really focusing on great CPU performance, SSD storage, and so on. So it was all about the performance of those.
Even in 2012, okay.
That's correct, yeah. So, so anyway, so that's what we built, and then of course, we put our sales hat on, started calling on customers. Come and trial our VDI and run your machines in our cloud, and look, you get all these benefits. And we were using Citrix as the vehicle to do that.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, we became quite expert at pitching the benefits, and customers really understood the benefits. What they really struggled with was, well, I've got a laptop, I own Windows OS, so now you're saying I've got to buy. I've got to rent Windows OS from you, and I've got to pay all this other tax, because we were using VMware as well. So there's a Citrix tax, there's a VMware tax, there was a Microsoft OS tax, and when you added it all up, the math just never worked. That was a real challenge to us, because we were targeting the mid-market, because we felt that there were some performance and security benefits to the mid-market.
Yeah.
And at the time, the VDI was having some success, but it was having some success in very, very large companies.
Yes.
And VDI to those large companies meant they could reduce their IT, personnel. They could, the whole management of desktop PCs. If you've got 2,000 VDI clients, it just becomes a lot simpler.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the space we were in. We were talking to customers that had 60 employees, and we were trying to persuade 15 of them to move to the cloud. And,
it's a very similar story to what I worked around that same time, actually, as well. When I was working in 2013, when I joined Zetagrid, I was tasked with trying to upgrade the VMware stack to Horizon when Horizon first came out. The Blast protocol was new, so all of a sudden you had a much nicer, sort of more efficient way to have a virtual desktop as opposed to PC over IP, which was a hog on the resources, on the bandwidth, and that was always a problem as well. But especially, I'm not sure how Canada was, but obviously Australia's infrastructure for connectivity wasn't fantastic, right? And there's with VDI, there's always these problems. There's connectivity, there's performance, and there's cost. And I think for a lot of the time, for the best part of the last 20 years, all three of those have been issues, right? I remember when I first started working all the way back in 2002-03, we had a product on dial-up that would go and do remote desktop services out to offices, and we were selling this, right? But on a ADSL connection or a dial-up, it just was not feasible, right? The slowness, but people wanted it. So you're right, like people always had this desire. IT had a desire to move to it, but the technology for my end just hasn't been there for the most part. But obviously, and we might touch on this in a couple of minutes, there was certain tech platforms that came out that made it better. General speed of internet connectivity made it more viable. The price of SSDs, the price of compute, that obviously made it a bit more of a doable exercise as well. But did you actually start with an anchor customer, or were you searching for clients? I'm just wondering, how was it a bet basically, or did you have an anchor? Because typically
it was 100%. It was 100% a bet. So we felt very confident that there was a market opportunity. So we built it, proved that it worked, and then went out hunting for customers. And you're right.
So what happened?
Those were the Sorry, those were the three hurdles. Bandwidth, performance, and cost. I think that ultimately the biggest hurdle was cost.
Yep.
That was what was ultimately was the biggest hurdle in getting deals over the line. But at the end of the day, though, one of the things that came out of that, we were talking to, I don't know, tens of customers a week about it, was, the backup and disaster recovery and security of it were very, very compelling. So ultimately, that became the cornerstone of creating an offsite backup and disaster recovery service. So because that's what we were hearing from customers loud and clear.
Yep.
Was we appreciate we love the VDI, but we're not ready for that. But let's go back and talk about backup.
Interesting.
And that became a like a seed, if you like, to the portfolio as it is today.
That's really interesting. Okay, yeah. So what about infrastructure? I mean, you guys offer infrastructure as a service as well. How did that sort of sprout out of the VDI focus?
Well, I think ultimately we had always started the company with the view that ultimately our channel to market would be through, IT resellers, MSPs, ISPs, and so on. So everything that we did from day one was about creating a channel-centric business. So, early on, we talked to lots of companies directly because, you need to get that feedback of what's marketable, what's not marketable, and so on. And then when we discovered that there was a cloud backup opportunity, from day one we modeled all that around selling through an IT reseller group, and then the strategy then became, okay, we'll be a cloud provider. We're going to create this whole portfolio of cloud services. We'll run the infrastructure, and you, ABC Networks, next Monday morning can go to market with that suite of cloud services.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's how that infrastructure as a service business really accelerated.
Yeah. So the VDI leads to infrastructure, leads to backup services, cascades. You guys are growing. So in the early days, like how many employees did you have in those early years in the sort of 2012 to 2015, 16 period? When did you start to really ramp up after that?
Oh, it took 2 or 3 years. So there were probably 5 or 6 only 5 or 6 of us after about 3 years.
Yep.
Now there's 45 or so. So
wow, okay.
It's and the rate of growth now is far higher than it was even at the beginning. So it's definitely it's very interesting. You start a company, so. When we moved to see the market opportunity for backup, it's great. So lots of appetite for it. So that was good. And then, customers are getting ready to cut their purchase orders. They go, so how long have you been in business? Oh, 4 months is the worst possible answer if you're selling backup and disaster recovery services.
Yeah.
So we spent a lot of time, getting some anchor accounts in backup, and then, when you're answering the 4-month, which is a terrible answer. When you're forced to answer that, you say, however, company X is a lead customer, and you get comfort and credibility around.
Yeah, you get the credibility, and I think also the underlying technology, man. The show is great things on great tech, right? So that means that a lot of the guys that I interview have built great services on great foundational technology. You've mentioned Citrix. You've obviously got VMware as the hypervisor there. Just mention all of the, what in terms of backup software, like what are you guys using? Obviously, I know one of the answers, but what else are you using there for your backups and whatnot?
Yeah, so we started early on. We were the first product we brought to market was now owned by SolarWinds, and that was it's convenient. And then as we started talking to more and more partners, and ultimately their end user customers. Veeam kept coming up, so we engaged with Veeam quite early on in the company's history.
Yeah.
And frankly, we've done very well with Veeam, for lots of reasons we can get into. And as Veeam has been more successful in the market, and adding features and expanding the applicability of that solution, it's allowed us to expand as well. So we've been very committed to Veeam, and today 80% of our backups are running using Veeam.
So you're running infrastructure backups and offsite backups as well. So just talk about the space. I do want to go back and touch on the VDI side, because I want to touch into an area that we didn't talk about, which I've got on my notes. But let's just focus and set and finish off the backup and DR space. Backup is great. We all know that people need backup now. If you're doing infrastructure, you got to back up your VMs. If you've got on-premises workloads, you got to back that up. On-premises through your resellers, that the resellers control a managed component of that. You provide them with an end location to store that data with the technologies and whatnot. So for me, backup is commoditized. It's kind of table stakes, but DR in itself is still on the edge. And I've asked this of a couple of providers who have been on the show. Where do you see the state of DR as a service today, and where can you see it going in the future?
It's a good point, actually. So, I think if we went back to 2012, 2014, and we were talking a bit to customers about backup, their idea of backup was moving their data offsite. So it's like, well, is your service iCloud like? Well, no, not really. But if you if you want to think about it that way, yep, it's offsite and it's
it's what? It's amazing how many people my wife and my parents and my grandparents talk to and say he works in the cloud and he works in the iCloud, and that's kind of okay. I just roll with it because it's just easy. So I understand it.
So, and of course, and there's a big difference now to 2014 as well. So in 2020. 2012, 2014, 2015, we were evangelists of cloud because cloud adoption was still at a massive infancy.
Yes.
Now, it's a long time since I've talked to a customer about the benefits of cloud because I understand that, right? So it's a little different. But when we started, it was the focus of end users was about offsite backup. Our focus was no, we've got your backups. And obviously, depending on the backup agent and how we've done that backup, we can restore those backups in our cloud. And having that ability to restore was prolific. And the way that we've always gone to market is we don't charge for disaster recovery. We charge for is the cloud backups. So you're getting this insurance that we can restore those workloads in our cloud for free. And that's pretty cost effective, right? Okay. So that's how we've gone to market with DR. Now, what I would say is if you're doing cloud DR for a golf course, or you're doing cloud DR for a legal firm that's got 14 locations, very, very different approach to DR, right? So the more enterprise end of that market, there's a lot of wrapper that we put around that DR. Quite often we'd put a DNS server in our cloud. We'd set up firewalls. We'd set up private networking. We'd set up VLANs and so on. All in the event that if they had a disaster, all of those steps are in place, as opposed to when you're running around panicking.
Right.
So there's there is in the market, even in the market today, there's a big difference between what an enterprise is asking for from a DR perspective and what a small business is asking for. But because we've got channel partners that sell to that breadth, where we can address that small dental office, and we can also address the large multi-site international.
Yeah, and typically those dental offices and those golf courses, they're the ones that I think are kind of like the ones that you can easily cherry pick, right, for your services, because they're less likely to have the capability within themselves. So, working through your channel partners, they obviously are going to dictate to them what technology they should use to keep their business running. And I think back in the day, like you said, it was pretty much okay just to run a backup offsite, and that was it. But you need more today, and the way that you described, that end-to-end, that wrapper around the replication, the backup is kind of easy, right? That just kind of gets done. Underlying technology looks after that, but then the hardest part of any DR strategy is what happens after the actual event. Bringing the network up. How are people going to connect into services? That's important. So you guys have thought about that, and you're building that into your solutions as well. Is that kind of standard for any customer or any? So you work through the channel, through the reseller. So what part do the resellers control in that end-to-end process?
It's quite variable, to be honest. It depends on the capabilities of the resellers, but typically, the reseller is managing the customer's on-premise backups, and then configuring HostedBizz as the cloud target.
Okay.
So that's pretty typical. For some resellers, they've got no expertise at all, and we're offering, with the case of Veeam as an example, we're offering a full managed service, so we're actually managing, the Veeam backup portal at the customer site, as well as obviously everything in our cloud. So we're doing both of those things, but typically the resellers are positioning a backup solution to the end user, and then we're then the cloud target, and we're doing that with a couple of other backup vendors as well.
Yeah, okay, good. And who are those backup vendors? We'd like to sort of get all of them out on the show. Yeah,
so we're running some Cohesity workloads in our cloud. We've been quite impressed with that product, particularly for larger enterprises. It's quite differentiated from some of the core features that the Veeam offers. So we've seen good opportunity with that solution. And again, we continue our relationship with SolarWinds as well.
Okay.
And SolarWinds, we're seeing more appetite for very small businesses and or very old OS. Their offering is support Windows 2003, for example.
Not surprising with SolarWinds. Yeah, it's kind of that company, isn't it? It's been around for a while, so.
Yeah. So, but you know what? There's a lot of those machines do exist, right? So what you don't want to do is go to a customer that's got an appetite for backup and say, well, before we can back you up, you need to upgrade all your operating systems. Because then it just becomes a massive challenge, right? So
exactly.
And again, as a service provider, when we sell through a partner of IT resellers and MSPs, I think it's important that we can support anything they want to do. So if they if they want to position something other than SolarWinds or other than Veeam, then we're there for them. And
no, that makes sense.
We are seeing recently with a continued transition to S3 compatible storage. We've got people archiving Commvault to our cloud. A little convoluted in terms of ever trying to create recoveries for them. But if the customers want the data somewhere else, we can do that for them very cost effectively.
Yeah, there you go. So the other services that you guys offer, so you got like file syncing, got like that object storage solution that you've talked about, file archiving, cybersecurity, and monitoring. You do backup for Office 365, and you're becoming a Microsoft CSP as well. So you're really kind of broadening out to cover all areas of that sort of cloud solution. Object storage you mentioned is an important one. I think more and more we're seeing a lot of providers just need to offer object storage because it is becoming a de facto way to store data in big quantities at a cheaper rate. So that's great. And what are you guys using there for the backing of the object storage?
Yeah, so we made a commitment to Cloudian about 18 months ago. So we've been running Cloudian S3 compatible storage in our cloud. Quite happy with the product, to be honest. And you're right. So there's a couple of things about S3. It's cost effective because ultimately the storage overhead is lower. But we're also seeing vendors pick on some of the APIs that S3 storage offer as well. So immutability, for example. We've seen a really big appetite for immutability. Customers anxious to create the ultimate protection against ransomware and other terrible attacks. Immutability is very compelling.
Yeah, it's something. It's certainly something that's coming to the fore. I mean, I think it's kind of the new tape to a certain extent, right? Because tape had that air-gapped notion to it, and that was kind of warm and fuzzy. But I think, tape becoming a little bit antiquated, and it's still being used. Obviously, we come across it quite often. I come across it quite often. But I think immutability is kind of the tape replacement as such, because you can guarantee levels of protection on that data as you write it to disk for the immutability period. And then you're protected against like you said, ransomware, but more importantly, malicious user or accidental deletion. So yeah, and being able to offer a platform that has those capabilities is obviously significant. I just wanted to step back and talk about the VDI stuff, because I know that we talked about the challenges of VDI. We talked about the fact that performance was a big one. How did you get around that? What technology did you leverage to basically, boost your VDI, from the Citrix days, to it becoming successful? And I think even you mentioned to me before that it's actually getting more successful today, and you're actually selling more VDI today. What's backing that in terms of a technology?
So from that start, we kind of defocused on the VDI because we were seeing these other cloud service opportunities growing for us. So I think, from a VDI, if you go back 4 or 5 years ago, all of our VDI was, remote desktop or, some other RDS type service. And, really it was, a typical use case would be, I want to move my Sage accounting package to the cloud. I want 4 people to access it. So RDS, it's adequate for delivering that type of service. So we have a lot of customers with that type of connectivity into our cloud. But over the last couple of years, with the improvements with VMware Horizon View, we've been using Horizon View now to light up VDI. So that's our VDI engine of choice today.
Yep.
And through the current pandemic, we've seen a massive appetite for VDI.
Not surprising.
And it's not surprising. And there's a couple of things about it. So one is, I think the overall VDI tax is down because you don't have the same OS burden that you had in 2012 in the way that you can position desktops. Microsoft 365 obviously has kind of helped people move to that sort of architecture as well.
Yep.
We're lighting up a lot of Horizon View desktops, and then the other thing that we've seen, acutely through the pandemic is a need for GPU or graphic accelerated desktops. So we can offer GPU desktops as well through View, and I'm pleasantly surprised at the appetite we're seeing for that. It's really quite substantial.
It's something I never got into, right? I know that Deskstone were sort of fundamental to sort of driving that through the VMware stack. Are you guys using Deskstone at all in any way, or?
We're not using Deskstone. So Deskstone, just to back up a little, our CTO came from Deskstone, so he had a lot of VDI experience. And then Deskstone was acquired by VMware, so a lot of the configuration tools within Horizon View ultimately is Deskstone under the hood.
Is Deskstone.
Yeah. So we're using it, but that's just not how VMware are taking it to market. But
okay. I always wondered with that one, because we I was looking to deploy it as a POC. I remember back in the day, but the problem was that VMware and Deskstone, as the acquisition just happened, didn't really want anyone deploying it but themselves, which always makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable about a technology. If it was like NSX, when NSX first came out, VMware were saying that we've got to do it. And I used to say, well, we don't want to pay for anyone to do it. I feel like we can do this ourselves. Eventually, we won that battle at Zedagrid, and we were able to deploy it ourselves and successfully deploy it. But I'm always a bit wary about tech where they say, let us do it end to end, and you can get the keys afterwards. But it's good to hear that they've integrated the technology into what is Horizon today. All right, let's go into some of the questions that I ask typically most weeks. So, how would you say that you guys disrupted the market initially?
Well, I think initially, that I mentioned earlier that there was, if you're a large enterprise, you're covered for cloud. You can go to a public cloud company, and certainly in Canada, you could go to any of the major telcos, and they'll help you out. But nobody was calling on the mid market, and nobody, and there are a bunch of MSPs that were used to selling SANs and blade chassis and so on, that had never sold cloud and would never sell cloud, and we saw that as a real market opportunity. So difficult to get people off of the instant gratification of making gross margin on selling hardware, but getting them onto a recurring cloud product that's managed. I think that was a real milestone for the company.
Okay, and in terms of the reseller, to have a successful reseller model and to be successful in that area, you have to have a good structure in place as well. You have to have strong back-end systems, strong reporting, strong licensing. What helps you guys have a successful channel business, and what helps you get those difficult stats to them to make them successful, make their lives easier, and let them generate revenue through you guys?
Yeah, it's a good point, and it's not sexy, but billing is a massive issue for MSPs. So, if one of our MSPs, they might be buying their Microsoft 365 through us because of we're a Microsoft cloud service provider. They might be buying Veeam and DR services. They might be buying other things. They might be buying Microsoft licensing. They might have workloads running in our cloud. So they're doing all of these things with us. And then what we need to do at the end of the month is tell them what they've consumed and collect all that information and present it to them that helps them then ultimately bill their end users. So today we've got 4 or 5 developers on staff that are collecting all of that information. So they're collecting consumption out of VMware. They're collecting Microsoft license utilization. They're collecting backup stats from Veeam and other providers, and we're putting all of that in, and then we're presenting it to the customer. So instead of saying to that reseller, "Here's your bill for $28,600 for the month," what we're doing is, "Well, Mr. Reseller, you've got 14 customers with us. Here's the consumption for customer 1. Here's the consumption for customer 2, and the cost. Here's the consumption," and so on. So we, there's a need to piecemeal that information to the MSP, so that they can then take that information, then ultimately bill their customers.
Yeah, right.
Because we've always been very committed on having elastic billing. In my opinion, it's a massive cornerstone of what cloud is, and a lot of people early on in cloud, in particular, were selling buckets of compute and buckets of storage, and
easier.
To me, it's easy, and it's absolute. I see why they do it, because it makes billing easier, but you're losing the essence of cloud. Yeah. This ability to flex up and down is again another cornerstone of what we do in the market. So that forced us, if you like, to have this finite capability to do very detailed billing, right?
Yeah, and it just to point out as well, you guys don't actually have a central control panel that's out there. You guys leverage control panels from, I'm guessing, Cloud Director and a few other bits and pieces, right? So it's actually rare to have a very hyper successful service provider who has focused on utility billing, but not have a front end. So I think that's actually a unique aspect to you guys as well. You guys have just gone and said, look, we're happy with what VMware provides us. We're happy with vendor XYZ. So we're good with that. We're just going to focus on the important thing, which is the billing backend. We're going to make that strong for our resellers. That's our value. That's our strength. So I think that's a great differentiator and unique, actually, to other people.
And of course, the other thing is, I would say perhaps only 20% of our partners self-serve. The other 80%, they call us. Yep. So if you call us and say, I want a 6-core 24 gig machine lit up on our cloud, can you light it up for me? Of course we can, right? Now, of course they can as well. But I've seen other service providers where they do have a management portal for everything, and the problem is you get dumbed down to the weakest link,
lowest common denominator.
And part of our value is that managed service of offering a total cloud portfolio.
That's awesome.
And you're not going to get a regional MSP that is expert on Veeam, or expert on archiving to S3, or running GPU VDI desktops. They're just not expert enough. So that's the value that we bring, is that we are their cloud provider. We can tell them how to sell it. We can tell them how to architect it. We can architect it for them, and so for some of them, we can even manage it for you. So
there you go.
So it is that value added.
Yeah. That's the greatness.
Otherwise, self-serve, go to Azure. But you're losing a lot of benefits and flexibility by making that decision.
That's a great point. I totally get where you're coming from. Let's just finish off and wind up. Like I say to most of the people on the show, we could talk for hours and keep on going, right? But I wanted to just, before we end on the question about innovation and partnership, where do you see your services going over the next 3 to 5 years? Like, is it status quo in terms of what you got, or are you looking to differentiate and grow into different service areas, public cloud, continue to offer to do SaaS protection or SaaS management? Like, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years?
Well, I think what we've always done is we've listened to our partners. The partners call us, do you have a product for this service? And if we say no, and we say no 3 or 4 times, we start looking for that service. So that's what's really got us back into VDI. We've seen demand for that, as I mentioned earlier. We recently brought a managed cyber monitoring service to market. We've seen a massive demand for that.
What's backing that, out of interest?
So we're using a third-party solutions as part of that. The cornerstone of that is from a company called Field Effect Software.
Okay.
And that is really, it's monitoring potential intrusions, and it's monitoring for
very important today. Yeah.
Other things. And the appetite for that today is very high. So to answer your question, what do we see in 3 to 5 years? We'll keep adding these things to our portfolio, because ultimately, what would be great is for an MSP, everything they do in the cloud, they do with us. Now that's the case for some people, not for all of them, but that is our ambition. So and for us to fulfill against that ambition, we have to keep broadening that portfolio to make sure that we can do everything that they want to do.
Awesome. And the final question is, what makes a good partner for you, for a good technology partner?
I think with the good technology partners, I think the partners we have, I think they brought into to what we're bringing to the market as HostedBizz. So they're not necessarily focused on a deal by deal. They see the growth that we're achieving. So if you were our storage vendor in 2012, you've done very well from us, because we bought a lot of storage since then. So first of all, I think it's people that buy into the vision. And then obviously that gives us, the commercial benefits of that. And then, also obviously the solution has to be technically competent. There has to be an appetite for it in the market. And then if something goes wrong, which let's face it, we're all in the IT industry, things do go wrong. Then, what's the support like? And certainly the bigger we get, the more that support becomes critical, because the growth that the company is seeing, we just need to resolve those issues, as quickly as possible. So those are the key things. And the vendors that we've chosen in the past that we don't do business with now, almost certainly it'll be based on support.
Interesting. There you go. That's a good one to end on. I think support is critical. The technology can be great and you can build services on it, but the support needs to back it as well. So that's words to live by there. All right, Paul, that was really great. So I think we've learned a lot about, HostedBizz, the value prop, where you guys act in the market, the channel, the resell, all the technologies that you've built upon, starting with VDI, building into infrastructure service, backups, Office 365. It's a really great story. You guys have done really well, and I'm really happy that you have been able to tell it on Great Things with Great Tech. So thank you, Paul. Let's just wrap it up now. So I'll put all the details about HostedBizz, what we've talked about, the technologies mentioned in the show notes. You can find me at Anthony Spiteri and at GTWGT Podcast and at gtwgt.com and on YouTube. Again, please subscribe to the show if you aren't subscribed. Please subscribe on YouTube or the podcast client. And with that, I'd like to thank Paul and HostedBizz, and we'll see you next time on Great Things with Great Tech.